Do you agree with the strategy of focusing on the Oath Keepers and focusing on prosecuting that group of individuals first in order for it to be a deterrent?
You've got to throw the net wide, get all of them, both the organized groups, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, but find everybody who went into that building. Find them all. Again, not because of my concern that those people who committed a misdemeanor they're going to go into the community and reoffend. The message has to be sent of zero tolerance. We will find everyone and punish everyone who went in there so that no one does it again. We will hunt you to the end of the earth, even for a misdemeanor, and make you pay for that to send that message.
So a lot of people have suggested that there are a range of factors that would make it difficult to put the system has not been tested in this way. Do you agree with that it would be difficult or nearly impossible for the law enforcement institutions to put him in actual jail?
No, they would just put him in a double wide somewhere out near the fence, out in the grass. And he would eat there, he'd shower there, he'd exercise there, he'd be away, as Danya Perry said, from general population, but it's obviously doable.
Has indicted former FBI Director James Comey for a second time. Justice correspondent David Spunt's got the story. He's here in Washington. Hey, David, they're going to go at it again.
John, they're going at it again, not even a year after they went at it after the first time. We're told this via several law enforcement sources. We're told this is related to an Instagram post from the former FBI director last year when he posted on the beach. You may remember there was a formation of shells that said 8647 that were in that pairing of 8647, and he said something along the lines of, "Isn't this a curious formation that I just found while walking on the beach?" Well, critics to that post immediately pointed out that 86, at least in the restaurant world, means to get rid of or to kill something from a menu, 47 meaning the 47th president of the United States. So Comey did speak with the Secret Service, did speak with federal investigators. At the time he was interviewed last spring or early last summer, shortly after that happened, no charges were ever filed, but now it appears that he has been indicted today. We're working to learn more about the indictment. We're waiting to see if officials have anything to say on this. That is the post that you see right there, "Cool shell formation on my beach walk," from former director James Comey. Now, you also remember that he was indicted last year as well for allegedly lying to Congress.
Let's be real for a second. This is where the conversation gets a little deeper because now we're not just talking about one post. We're talking about intent, responsibility, and how the law actually looks at speech in this country. From my perspective, it's hard to believe that someone like James Comey didn't understand how that post could be interpreted. And we're not talking about a random person scrolling on their phone. This is someone who ran the FBI, who spent years dealing with threats, investigations, and how language can influence behavior. So when people say, "Oh, he didn't know what it meant," that's where a lot of regular people check out because it just doesn't line up with real life. If you think about it like this, if someone in your workplace, especially someone in the leadership role, posts something that can clearly be taken the wrong way, they don't just get to say, "I didn't mean it like that," and move on like nothing happened. There are consequences, or at the very least, there's an investigation into what they meant and why they said it. That's how accountability works in the real world. Now, at the same time, we do have to be honest about something important, and this is where the Constitution comes in. The First Amendment protects speech, even speech people don't like or that comes off the wrong way, and that's by design. The founders understood that free speech means you're going to hear things that are uncomfortable, things you disagree with, even things that make people angry. But there has always been a line, and that line is what the courts call a true threat, which is speech that crosses over from opinion into something that could reasonably be seen as encouraging or signaling harm. And it's not always just about what someone says they intended. Sometimes it's about whether a reasonable person will look at it and say, that could cause a real problem. And that's where cases like the one mentioned come into play, where the courts have said recklessness matters too, as you guys can see on the screen, in regards to the indictment of James Comey and things like that. So when you look at it like that, and where the courts have come into play, if you put something out there and ignore how it can be taken, especially in a heated political environment, that can become a legal issue. And this is real world impact matters, because we're not talking about this stuff in a vacuum. We've seen situations in this country where rhetoric, online posts, and political messaging have led to real consequences, let alone political violence. People get worked up, people take things seriously, and sometimes things go too far. And that's why the standard exists in the first place, not to shut people up, but to draw a clear line when speech starts to move into a dangerous territory. Now, to be fair, there are people on the other side of this who say this whole situation is being overblown. They argue that this was just a vague post, that it wasn't a direct threat, and that going this far with charges could set a bad precedent for free speech. And that's a fair concern. Nobody wants to live in a country where every unclear or poorly worded post turns into a criminal case. But here's where it doesn't add up for a lot of people, because the same voices now saying this is too much have supported aggressive enforcement in other situations where speech was interpreted as dangerous. So again, we're back to consistency. From my perspective, the standard shouldn't change depending on who the person is or what side they're on politically. If the rule is that you don't put out messages that could reasonably be taken as threats towards the president, then that rule has to apply to everyone. And if it doesn't, people are going to notice. And when people start to feel like the rules are flexible, depending on who you are, that's when trust in the system starts to break down. And that's where you see things being overblown, because it's selective amount of true is a selective it's a selective point of accountability taking place, because you're only selectively picking certain individuals instead of across the board. I have seen regular everyday American citizens who have threatened the president also be held accountable and get picked up by their local sheriff's officers working with the federal law enforcement, due to the simple fact that you can be seen as a threat. There's nothing to play with. And just to mention also, when it comes to responsibility or free speech, you also have to understand the standard is upheld even when you in school as a young kid, right? What I have come to understand being in high school is where, going to a private Catholic high school, that you represent this institution when you're on the campus and you're in school and when you're outside of it. And if problems outside of it tend to come into the school, then that means you still get held accountable, even if your speech occurred outside of the school. So you are a representation in and outside of the school. So what do you think the difference is as an American citizen when it comes to respecting the most powerful position on the law of the land, which is the president? So at the end of the day, this is why we have a legal process. An indictment is not a conviction. It just means there's enough there to ask the question in court. And the jury is going to look at the evidence, the context, and decide what this actually was. Was it reckless? Was it intentional? Or was it truly a misunderstanding? That's not for social media to decide, because we know a lot of times people like to convict people in a court of public opinion. But that's what the court is for. But outside of that process, people are still going to have opinions, rightfully so. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, don't deem or banish or belittle, or I should say, cancel someone when there is a due process, right? In a court of law, when it comes to that, innocent till proven guilty. So that standard is the standard in the court of law. But a lot of people like to bash people because they don't like them, even because they have their opinion. That doesn't mean that it's right, because if that's the case, everybody would be convicting each other just for the simple fact of agreeing, or agreeing to disagree, and just having a difference of opinions they don't like. So what a lot of people are seeing in this is a situation where accountability is being tested in real time. And the bottom line is simple. The standard has to apply across the board. If it does, people can accept the outcome, even if they don't like it. If it doesn't, then it stops being about one case and starts becoming a much bigger issue about fairness, consistency, and trust in the system overall. And just so you guys see the facts, because I know I came across one clip with the mainstream media that James Comey, this is not the first time he beat the first case. He didn't beat the first case. The first case was dismissed. So I figured I'd show you guys the facts, because if you put it in Grok on X, the first case was dismissed on November 24th, 2025 by U.S. District Judge Cameron McGuan Carey. Simple reason: the judge ruled that the prosecutor who brought the charges, Lindsay Halligan, was not lawfully appointed. Because of that technical mistake, the whole indictment was thrown out. It was dismissed without prejudice, meaning the government could try to refile it. And now that's why you see it again. So now they're trying to say, oh, he's indicted for a second time. But it got dismissed the first time. So I just want to fact check that and give you guys the facts, and then let the chips fall where they may lay. And I'm not trying to tell you what to think or how to think. We just having a conversation. But however, when you look at that, that was also in the previous administration. A lot of critics is looking at it and saying, well, in the previous administration, they let a lot of things slide, just like, for example, within the statement, as the president would say, when it comes to letting illegals come across the border. So are you surprised that when critics say, hey, this got dismissed, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't be held accountable? So what I think, in my opinion, is that if it's getting tried again, this second one that we're talking about right now is being tried in the Eastern District of North Carolina. That's where the grand jury indicted him on April 28th, 2026. The charges involve the Instagram Seashell, as you guys see that we're talking about. I'll show you guys in the clip in a minute. The visual, but the case is assigned to Judge Lewis W. Flanagan in New Bern, North Carolina. From my understanding, what I have understand from watching reports and hearing from critics, that this is a Clinton-appointed judge. So it might get thrown out. If that's the case, what I do believe, family, that somehow this case will be trickled down and they will find a way to attach it to the state of Florida, and then they will hold him accountable then. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying that's happening, but I'm just giving you my opinion, and I want to know you guys' thoughts in the comments below. But because we know the courts can somewhat come political sometimes, maybe some, maybe not. Depends on the judge, right? Some judges, as critics would say, come off more left, far left, or left, reporting the Democrats, and some report the Republicans, or some is just common sense, right? You got the left, the right, and the middle. So with all that being said, now that I showed you guys that and the whole situation and give you guys the context, now I want to show you guys the next clip.
We also know that there has been investigation ongoing down in Florida around a broad swath of the Russia investigation. Many years ago, starting back in 2016, an investigation Comey had worked on until Donald Trump fired him as his FBI director. Could it be something related to that? A lot of questions here, but this is going to be a really interesting case moving forward, because Comey had been indicted again and had been trying to make arguments in court the last time he faced charges in the fall that he was being singled out for prosecution, that it was very unfair. You're very likely to see something like that again from his legal team. And I did try and reach out to them for more information. I have nothing back at this point on that front. We're still waiting. Boris?
Today, a grand jury in the Eastern District of North Carolina returned a true bill indicting Mr. James Comey with committing 2 felonies. Count 1, he knowingly and willfully made a threat to kill and to inflict bodily harm upon the President of the United States in violation of 18 U.S.C. 871A. Count 2, he knowingly and willfully transmitted in interstate and foreign commerce a communication that contained a threat to kill President Trump in violation of 18 U.S.C. 875C. Mr. Comey will be given every form of due process all citizens are entitled to receive, to include a trial by a jury of his peers. In the Eastern District of North Carolina, it doesn't matter who you are. We take all threat cases seriously and prosecute anyone who violates federal law, regardless of title or status.
He knowingly and willfully making a threat to take the life of and to inflict bodily harm upon the President of the United States. Count 2, same day, May 15th, 2025, that the defendant, James Comey, knowingly and willfully transmitting in interstate commerce a communication that contained a threat to kill the President of the United States. Both of these counts carry a maximum term of imprisonment of 10 years.
Should we expect more indictments of this sort? For example, in 2020, Gretchen Whitmer did a TV hit with 8645 on her desk in the background. Is that the kind of thing you would pursue? And then just really quickly, should Comey expect to face more charges for his role in the Russia collusion investigations?
I'm not going to comment on other investigations involving Mr. Comey. He was indicted in the Eastern District of Virginia. That was dismissed on procedural grounds because of the judge's finding regarding the U.S. attorney. So that case is under appeal. As far as other investigations that are happening. It would not be appropriate or fair for me to comment on that time. As far as other incidents of threats against the President of the United States, those will be investigated. Every case is different. The facts are different. Who makes the threat matters. What the threat says matters. You're right. The question about intent matters, and we have to prove that. That's something that's our job, and that's something that prosecutors will have to do in front of a jury at the right time. But you cannot compare. It's not fair to the American people. It's not fair to the defendant. And it's certainly not fair to the prosecutors to compare, well, if you did it here, why didn't you do it there? Every case is different, but there's one thing that will never be different, which is that you cannot threaten to kill the President of the United States, full stop.
Well, they're back. This time about a picture of seashells on a North Carolina beach a year ago. And this won't be the end of it. But nothing has changed with me. I'm still innocent. I'm still not afraid, and I still believe in the independent federal judiciary, so let's go. But it's really important that all of us remember this is not who we are as a country. This is not how the Department of Justice is supposed to be. And the good news is we get closer every day to restoring those values. Keep the faith.
The reality is there is a similar zeal to punish you for doing more than exercising your First Amendment rights, for doing your job as the then director of the CIA. What is it like to sort of watch this news come across it's not a wire anymore, but come across our devices?
Well, Nicole, an overused term is appalling. I find it appalling. Jim Comey served as a U.S. Attorney and the Deputy Attorney General for President George W. Bush. He served as the Director of FBI for President Barack Obama. It is absurd to think that Jim Comey would be advocating violence against anyone, much less a President of the United States. I served with Jim Comey during the last years of the Obama administration. He is somebody who I think served his country with integrity, with professionalism, and with determination to make sure that the rule of law was going to be followed. And so, as you pointed out, I think there has been a litany of these efforts over the past number of years, past year and a half, by Donald Trump to, exact revenge against some of his perceived political adversaries. So I feel very, very dismayed that Jim Comey is going through this and has to go through more of it. I am in that crowd of folks who has been targeted by Donald Trump.
Seashells, though. This is about the picture that he put up of the seashells that say 8647, where he wrote in the caption, "Cool shell formation on my beach walk." Is that serious enough to merit? He ended up taking that down and saying he didn't realize
Why did he take it down?
He said that he didn't realize some folks associated it with violence and that he opposed violence of any kind.
Well, James Comey is a very intelligent man. I would assume he knows what the term 86 means. I was a waiter for some time. When you 86 an order, you kill the order. When you 8645, that is tantamount to saying killing the President of the United States. He should have known that.
When you 86 an order, you get rid of the order, right?
Correct.
But you're not actually, you're not killing the food. I just want to be clear. When you
kill the order. It's the same principle, Brianna. We can agree to disagree.
I hear what you're saying, but there could be room for debate on that. And certainly.
Why even put something out there like that?
I mean, a very good question. But do you indict over it? Is my question.
I have not seen this specific indictment. What is?
It has to be remembered that this indictment is so different from the previous Comey indictment. This involves a threat against the President of the United States. So the common courtesy of allowing somebody to self-surrender may not be extended here. And especially in light of the White House Correspondents' Dinner debacle, I think that it probably won't be extended here because a message has to be sent. And of course, Mr. Comey is presumed innocent, but a message has to be sent to the people that are watching this that if you are accused of threatening the president, you'll get no courtesy, and there'll be a price to pay. There was a U.S. Supreme Court decision handed down a couple of years ago in 2023 called Callerman versus Colorado, and it emanated from a stalking case in Colorado. and the justices redefined what's protected and what's not protected. And this concept of true threat was really focused on. And it's a subjective standard. But if there's a recklessness, and if you consciously disregard what effect your speech or posting, in this case of some seashells, might do to incite someone, then you've got a problem. And I think if you get a jury impaneled and they hear that this isn't a guy, and I think he'll be judged because of his past a little differently. This isn't a guy working at the Pepsi plant. This is a former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, a former deputy attorney general in the Department of Justice.
There's a difference here, Bill.
Director of the FBI.
You're talking about incitement, though. I'm just saying, like the charge here is that he willingly and knowingly made a threat to take the life himself. I mean, I take your point about.
But the law here.
Yeah.
But the law here is if he consciously disregarded through recklessness an effect that might have on others, they can bootstrap that there. It doesn't have to be, it's not solely his subjective intent. And you have to ask yourself, according to a statement, he's just walking down the beach, he sees these seashells. I mean, if a 60-some-year-old man who used to run the FBI sees this, he's going to post it on Instagram like some 13-year-old girl. I mean, it doesn't come into his head that, wow, this could possibly incite someone like the fellow from California who's accused to violence. I mean, it's a serious case.
Let me press pause on this conversation for a second.
Yeah, so you saw that. You heard exactly how they laid it out. And this isn't just people online arguing back and forth. This is a grand jury stepping in and saying there's enough to actually move this forward. And that matters because the grand jury isn't there to play politics. Their job is simple. Look at the evidence, decide if this is serious enough to go to trial. And in this case, they said yes. So when people immediately jump to this is political prosecution or political persecution, you got to slow that down and really think about what's happening here, because this didn't come out of nowhere. This went through a legal process. Now, James Comey, he's saying he's innocent. You guys heard that. He's being targeted. And look, he has every right to say that. He'll get due process. He'll get his day in court just like anyone else. But here's where people start questioning things. The same system that's being called unfair right now, and it's the same system we've been told for years, is supposed to be trusted without question. And from my perspective, that's where things stop adding up. Now, let's talk about what this actually looks like in real life. You got a former FBI director, not just some random person online, someone who understands exactly how threats are interpreted, how language is analyzed, and how intent, right, gets evaluated, because that was literally part of his job. So when you look at that, something like, what was posted, I'm not going to say it, people are reaching when they say there's meaning behind it. This is someone who knows how this stuff is read. Now, on the legal side, they're saying these are felonies, not one, but two, both tied to making and transmitting a threat against the president, and each of those carry serious time. And we're talking years, not months. So the idea that this is just some harmless post that got misunderstood, that's not how the law is treating it. The law is treating it as something serious. And again, the grand jury agreed there's enough there to move forward. But then you look at how some of the coverage frames this, and this is where people get frustrated, because instead of focusing on the standard, which is no matter who is the president, it should be no threat towards the president and the most powerful position in the law of the land. There should be respect, and it should be respect, let alone integrity being upheld, and everything else that come with that. You should just be able to respect that position, right? I'm gonna put it there: respect, integrity, and let alone the simple fact that it's the individual who is leading our country. And how the laws apply, you see a lot of focus on whether he's being treated unfairly. From my perspective, that misses the bigger point. For years, the message has been clear: nobody is above the law. And I agree with that. But the real question is whether that standard is being applied evenly. Because if it is, then this situation shouldn't be controversial. See, you can try to remix or redefine. And a lot of people, a lot of individuals, when they want things to go in their convenience because they want to convince somebody for their own benefit, they will redefine or remix a word for their own benefit instead of actually understanding straightforward facts that this is the law. You can't remix the law. This ain't a music video. This ain't a song where you can remix anything. So it's pretty straightforward when it comes to the law, and it should be straightforward. And if any perceived threat toward the president is taken seriously, investigated, and potentially prosecuted, then that has to apply across the board. And this is where it becomes real for everyday people. There are regular people who have been investigated or charged over things they posted online that was interpreted as threats towards the president, and as threats, period. Sometimes they say it was a joke. Sometimes they say it was taken out of context. But the system doesn't always get a benefit of the doubt. So when people see someone at this level in a similar situation, they expect the same level of scrutiny. The overall standard is we all want to be productive individuals when it comes to our communities and productive citizens of society, doing things that are positive, continue to promote the good things in which the opportunity in which this land has given us, let alone the amazingness, and let alone the beauty, and also the gratitude of being able to understand that in the United States of America, you have so many options and privileges, far more way than other countries. That's why a lot of individuals wants to come here. But you have the thing is, in the standard and how this country was founded is you have opportunities. It's up to you to seize the opportunity. You get what you get out of what you put in, and based on how hard you work, you get what you get based on how hard you work to get what you got. So if you're considering something, if you're online and you're doing something, whether it's towards the president or just a threat to society or your community or wherever you are, right? You have to understand the same level of scrutiny is upheld. Now, to be fair, for the safety of everybody. Now, to be fair, prosecutors did say every case is different, intent matters, context matters, and that's true. That's how the legal system works. But they also made one thing clear: you cannot threaten the president, full stop. So now it comes down to this: was that post a threat, or wasn't it? That's what a jury is going to have to decide. But outside the courtroom, people are already forming opinions. And what a lot of people are saying is a system that can feel very aggressive in some situations and more cautious in others. Whether you agree with that or not, that perception is real. And once people start questioning consistency, that's when trust in the system starts to break down. I say that all the time because you see a lot of rules for me, but not, rules for thee, but not for me. So when I break this stuff down, I'm just letting you guys know, and I'm not telling you what to think, but I'm just telling you the facts, but we just having a conversation based on what the standard is. So yeah, he says he's innocent, and some coverage says he's being treated unfairly. But at the end of the day, the facts are going to matter more than the headlines, and whatever the standard is has to be applied the same way to everyone, or people going to keep questioning how the system actually works. So when you look at all of this, going beyond just this one situation, and starts getting into how responsibility actually works, especially when you had a position like that, working as a former FBI employee and things like that for multiple administrations. They mentioned Barack Obama, George W. Bush. It's hard to believe that someone, from my perspective, it's hard to believe with someone with that level of experience didn't understand how that post could be interpreted. We're talking about someone who led the FBI, someone who dealt with threats, investigations, and how language can influence behavior. So when people hear that explanation, that it was just random, harmless posts, a lot of them aren't buying it because it doesn't line up with how this works in the real world. Think about it in everyday terms. You are influencing people, whether you know it or not, indirectly or directly, little or small, big or small. It doesn't matter. You do influence someone, whether you believe it or not. And if someone in a position of authority says or posts something that can clearly be taken the wrong way, they don't just get to brush it off and move on. There's scrutiny. There are questions, and sometimes there are consequences. That's how accountability works. Now, at the same time, we have to talk about the Constitution. I'll talk about it a lot because the First Amendment does protect speech, and even speech people don't like or that comes off the wrong way. That's intentional. Founding fathers understood that free speech means people are going to say things that others strongly disagree with. But they also understood the limit. Right? The same reason why we have separation of powers, executive, judiciary. You know what I'm saying? So if you got these separation of powers because they know it was a limit, what do you think was going to happen when it came to speech? And that's where the idea of a true threat comes in, right? Speech crosses the line from opinion into something that can reasonably be seen as encouraging or signaling harm, right? So when you look at all of that, Sometimes it comes down to whether a reasonable person will look at it and say this could cause a real problem. Courts have even said that recklessness matters. And if you put something out there and ignore how it can be interpreted, especially in a tense political environment, that can become a legal issue. Real world impact. People take things seriously. People act on what they believe they are seeing. And sometimes things escalate. That's why the standard exists in the first place. Not to shut people down, but to draw a line when things start moving in a dangerous direction. Now, to be fair, there are people who argue this is being taken too far. They'll say this was vague, not a direct threat, and that going this far could create a chilling effect on speech. And that's a valid concern, right? Nobody wants a system where unclear post turns into a criminal case. But here's where a lot of people see a disconnect. The same standard has been applied strictly in other situations and is now being debated here. So, again, that's where consistency, from my perspective, becomes the issue again. The rule can't change based on who the person is. And that's when we look at it. So, with all this being said and everything, being broken down, if the law is going to be taken seriously, then it has to be applied consistently. If it is, people can accept the outcome even if they disagree with it. If not, then it becomes a bigger than one case. So I'm gonna leave it there, family. Let me know what you guys think. Hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. I try to keep it simplistic and let you guys formulate what you believe will happen. And let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. As always, we having a conversation. Catch you in the next one. Peace.